So this Politico.com article was recently brought to my attention, and it's very positive for Donald Trump because it seems that the majority of Vietnamese people really like him. 58%, according to the Pew Research Center. And this makes Vietnam a minority country, and that the majority of the people here actually approve of and like Donald Trump, which is really fascinating. And this whole article goes into different explanations why. And I think I'll give the link. I'll give the link below, but without just reading it all, I'm just going to say that it does make a very fair point that the entrepreneur personality of Donald Trump really works favorably for him in Vietnam, just as it does in China. And I just think that's excellent. You know, just thinking that the celebrity behind who he was really influenced uh, his perception, and still does out here in Vietnam. And when talking to the people are just amazingly frank and honest in the sense that we would see it in Western culture. When reporters ask them, "So, are you excited? Do you hope you'll get to see Donald Trump?" And they'd say, "Well, yeah, I missed Obama, and I really wanted to see him." And our politics is so polarized, and we have such a we're so caught up in this homespun narrative of good versus evil that we would think, well, if you would want to meet one, you really wouldn't want to meet the other. But for them, just like it is for us deep down in our hearts, it really is a matter of celebrity, which, again, I think is one reason that Hillary Clinton lost the election a year ago, celebrating. I think that's one reason she lost is because she didn't get out there and shake hands and have that just country charm that old sleazy slick Willie Bill Clinton the rapist had. Which reminds me, and I've still got to do a review of this book. I was trying to get through it. It's just I'm so sick of hearing about the election so much. But Shattered, the new book about what came out this year about Hillary's loss, and I think that would be an interesting Christmas gift. So I might just do a report on that closer to Christmas. Back when we've had a chance to digest all of this election stuff, but. The authors point out that Bernie Sanders' brother, who is also an elderly individual, said that Bill Clinton was a rapist. So I wonder, and that's when he disappeared off the radar completely, and that's why none of us have heard about it. And I wonder if that had something to do with InfoWars. Anyway, that's getting way off topic here, but I just wanted to say that I'm very happy that the Vietnamese people approve of Donald Trump, and they're not gaslit in the same way that we are. And by we, I mean all of us in the West, including Russia and Australia. I mean the West, you know. So anyway, I guess he's going straight to Da Nang, is what I thought. But the political article says he's going to be here in Hanoi, which I guess would make sense because this is the capital. When Obama came, shortly after I got here, I got a chance to see his motorcade, and I pulled over and I just took a good look, and I was just surrounded by Vietnamese people, and I actually got off my my motorbike and stood up, and nobody else was doing that. Like one or two, but people were taking pictures and everything. I don't know, I might see the Trump motorcade, but it might slow me down. It might ruin traffic out here, but hopefully he's not here during a work day, because that would suck. Anyway, welcome to Vietnam, Trump. If you're anything like me, you'll never want to leave. But you're not like me at all because you've got piles and piles of money and followers and everything. Must be great to be you, Mr. Trump. But that's something that a lot of the Vietnamese people think as well. It's this idea that if you work hard and you go to the right business school, take up the right trade. I know young people out here who make lots and lots of money. It's very possible. There's a casino downtown. I didn't even know this until like a couple months ago. There's a casino downtown. And I went there and I saw these just young businessmen, just handfuls of, stacks of $100 bills. And that's what communism looks like in Vietnam and in China. without getting into the full economics of it, because it's really a mystery. Just as the Chinese people, and I've heard them described in this way before, is they're a mystery even unto themselves. And they'll even admit so much to you. You know? Living on China is akin to living on the moon. It really doesn't feel like being in a foreign country. Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, it really does feel like Earth, but it feels like a very primitive old Earth, like kind of a Amish country that stretches on and on out into the desert, as far as the eye can see. Let's look at Saudi Arabia now. So recently, there's been arrests of some very high-profile people, including academics, princes, top financial people, just people with power in Saudi Arabia. A lot of them are getting arrested. And there's talk that it's part of a government turnover, where the king is trying to give the power to one of his sons to abdicate himself for some kind of wrongdoing or whatever. And if you look into it, it's just monarchy politics that you would see in any country, like in Thailand, for example, has a king, but the rules play out in a very similar way. I think for a lot of Americans, we get confused not being in monarchies. Like, we think that a king is supposed to have some spiritual power, because that's kind of our interpretation of the old English kings. And of course, the King James Bible, we see that as like a spiritual groundstone. And even the non-religious among us, English speakers among us, it's one of those texts that we are encouraged to study and learn, just like Shakespeare or something. And so we associate kings with spiritual power. But someone in Arab in one of the, I think it was the Sargon of Akkad fan page on Facebook put it, in Saudi, the king isn't really a spiritual figure, nor is he really a political figure. He simply has power. And that sums it up brilliantly. I think that's also how the monarchy works in Thailand, where the king just has power. But, you know, the king, of course, makes a great show of their spiritual faith, and they go to all the same temple or mosque or whatever. And I'm not sure if Christian kingdoms work that way. I don't know. Many of the Christian societies that still have monarchies are run differently, I would say. Not that I've really spent, you know, I've never even been to the UK. But that's how I understand it. And even there, it's just a cultural thing, as far as I know. As far as I know. So anyway, the king just has power, and sometimes they turn over power to free themselves from wrongdoing. And it's similar to what happens in other forms of government, honestly, in communist regimes and democracies even, you know. People abdicate. Or, like in South Korea, I know a couple times people commit suicide. Former prime ministers, that is. Not kings, but the people who hold the power in the society. And in the case of South Korea, it was to spare his family. Like, they were given a nice pension, and they were given their freedoms and all that. And so it's seen as a, you know, a cultural thing. A way of showing shame or whatever. I don't know. It's slightly different everywhere, but essentially it's all the same fabric, I guess. Which is why I'm not too worried about it, but it is kind of shocking thinking that since I lived there a couple years ago, I've been out for 2 years. I've still got 1 year left of my ban, however, from ever returning into their borders, but I've already said too much. But in the time that I've left, now women are allowed to drive, which is kind of interesting, because I remember seeing that. Like, the men were all drivers, and yet they were still terrible. And yet the traffic was still awful, and I thought, maybe there isn't too much to this gender thing. Maybe we, you know, that's a trope, that's a cliche that we took a little far, and now we all kind of believe it. Thing about Chinese drivers, though, I won't even say it. I think it has more to do with their laws, the way things are enforced. But when I lived there, I didn't quite have the same perception as I have here in Vietnam, where I'm used to being in lots of traffic and I'm used to everyone breaking the laws in kind of the same way. Yeah, we come from America and we all follow the traffic rules. We stop at stop signs even when there's no other car for miles and miles. It's just something that we do. And I think that's a very telling and very accurate criticism of American culture. But that's just a sign. Just like a year before I got there, even just a few months before I got there, they started making the shopping malls co-ed. Granted, men and women still have to occupy different areas of the food court, like a middle school, like junior high school dance. Everyone is just in opposite parts of the food court, you know. They even put up walls in between the cash registers at McDonald's. Yeah, things are going to break. I think things are going to break very soon. They were telling me when I was at the shopping mall in Riyadh that there is a big problem now with young single people would write down their Facebook or their phone number on a little slip of paper and then drop it on the floor, like on the tiles in the shopping mall. And other people would pick them up. And that's how they would hook up, because if they even made eye contact, they would get in trouble. Well, kids got caught doing this. I talked to one religious police that I went out to the desert with on some outing. It was insane. And he was telling me the story about catching one girl who had done this, and she was crying and crying and crying and saying she didn't want her parents to know, repented to Allah and all this, and he said, okay, I'll let you go. And he tells this story, and we're sitting around the fire in the Arabian desert, and he's smoking cigarettes. We're all drinking coffee. Speaking of coffee. And I just think, okay, man. Things are changing. First they have co-ed shopping malls, then they have women driving. What next? I would walk in the park sometimes, and I would see uncomfortably people were, I mean, it wasn't like going to Santa Cruz or anything, but people were blending, people were mixing. It was boys and girls, teenagers. It was frightening for everybody involved. Walking around miles and miles around downtown Riyadh, all I saw was just toy shops, candy stores. That was a long time ago, and that was far, far, far away. Anyway, thank you for watching Jinka Jabo. Welcome to Vietnam, Mr. Trump.